I was just sipping my morning coffee, watching the news, like any regular Tuesday, when the TV screen flashed a picture of Mr. Sterling, all smug and important. It instantly made my stomach flip, bringing back that horrible day he called my father's life work, his brilliant, beautiful code, Doodles, and fired me. But this time, it was different. Last week, they smiled, thinking it was a simple bug, then froze, wide-eyed, when millions watched me control the outcome. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know. I remember that day like it was yesterday, even though it's been months now. The sun was streaming through the big windows at Omnitech, hitting my desk just right, making the dust motes dance in the air. I had my headphones on, really deep in some code, trying to solve a tricky little logic puzzle. It was a good day, you know? One of those days where the coffee tasted just right and everything clicked. I loved my job there, building stuff, making things work. It felt important. My dad, Arthur, always said coding wasn't just about making machines do things. It was about solving problems, about building bridges in the digital world. He called his own unique style of programming, the way he structured things and made them elegant, his doodles. He'd say, "Elsie, anyone can write code, but a true artist, they doodle." He'd been gone a few years now, but his words, his spirit, they were always with me, especially when I was deep in a project. I was working on the core system for Omnitech's big new satellite launch, Project Horizon. It was a massive deal, years in the making. My part was pretty critical, the communications module, the brain that would talk to the ground control. I'd built it with precision, but also with that touch of elegance, that subtle doodle philosophy my dad taught me. It made the code cleaner, more robust, almost impossible to break, and easier to scale. I was proud of it. My desk, messy with coffee cups and printed-out code snippets, felt like my own little kingdom. Chloe, my cube-mate and best friend, tapped my shoulder, making me jump. "Hey, Space Cadet," she laughed, her dark curls bouncing. "Lunch." I pulled off my headphones, grinning. "Yeah, almost lost track of time. This comms module is singing today, Chloe. It's really coming together." "That's awesome, Elle. You always make it sing," she said, genuinely happy for me. Chloe was a good egg, always positive. We walked to the cafeteria, chatting about silly office gossip and speculating about the new department head, Mr. Sterling, who was supposed to be starting this week. Everyone had heard he was a numbers man, very corporate, very no-nonsense. "Hope he appreciates your artistic flair, Elle," Chloe joked, not knowing how much those words would sting later. The next day, Mr. Sterling arrived. He was exactly as advertised, sharp suit, slicked back gray hair, a face that looked like it had never smiled, not really. He marched through the department, an army of executives trailing him, like he was inspecting new recruits. He stopped at every desk, gave a curt nod, and moved on. When he reached my desk, he paused for a fraction longer. "Miss Davies, I presume?" His voice was cold, clipped. "Elsie, yes, sir," I replied, trying to sound professional, a little nervous. He picked up one of my printed-out doodle code examples, my dad's signature style, which I used for reference. He didn't even read it, just sort of held it between two fingers like it was dirty. His eyes scanned my monitors, taking in the intricate lines of code I was so proud of. Then he made a sound, a dismissive humph, and dropped the paper back on my desk. "I've reviewed your preliminary submissions for Project Horizon, Miss Davies." My heart gave a little flutter. "Yes, sir. I've incorporated some advanced redundancy protocols and optimized the." He cut me off with a wave of his hand. "Frankly, Miss Davies, it's a mess. Your unique approach. This isn't art class. This is mission-critical aerospace technology. We need clean, conventional, scalable code, not these." He pointed vaguely at my screen. "These doodles. It's inefficient. Unprofessional." The word doodles hit me like a punch in the gut, especially with the sneer he put on it. It wasn't just my code he was insulting, it was my father's legacy, his memory. Publicly, in front of the whole team, his voice carrying just enough for everyone to hear. I felt my face flush. "But sir, my father, Arthur Davies, he developed this approach." It's incredibly robust, actually, and allows for much easier debugging because of its inherent modularity. It's been proven in countless. Your father's methods, I'm sure, were suitable for his time. Mr. Sterling interrupted again, his voice icy. But Omnitech is moving forward, Miss Davies. We require efficiency, not sentimental attachments. This project is too important for such personal flourishes. It compromises our operational integrity. He leaned in a little, his eyes narrow. This is not a suggestion, Miss Davies. This is a directive. Rewrite it. Immediately. I sat there, stunned, my cheeks burning. Chloe gave me a sympathetic glance, but she couldn't say anything. I swallowed hard, the humiliation a bitter taste in my mouth. I wanted to argue, to defend my dad's genius, but his stare just shut me down. I just nodded, a small, involuntary twitch of my head. The rest of the day was a blur. I tried to rewrite, but every line felt wrong, every change a betrayal. The joy was gone. The next morning, Mr. Sterling called me into his office. No pleasantries. He stood behind his large, shiny desk, arms crossed. Miss Davies, I've had a chance to further review your overall contributions to Project Horizon. And frankly, your inability to adapt to standard practices, your continued reliance on these antiquated methods, despite clear instructions. He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a guillotine. It's simply not conducive to our team's goals. Your personal flourishes, your doodles, as you call them, are a liability. We cannot afford liabilities, especially not on a project of this scale. He looked at me, completely devoid of emotion. Effective immediately, your employment with Omnitech is terminated. We'll have HR process your severance. My breath caught in my throat. Fired. Just like that. Because of my dad's methods, because of what he taught me, because of my personal flourishes. My mind felt like a static-filled TV. But, sir, the communications module, it's critical. It's deeply integrated. Changing it now, we'll manage, Miss Davies, he said, cutting me off one last time. Your work, particularly the legacy code you seem so fond of, has proven more of a hindrance than a help. We have a competent team who can rectify these issues. Please clear your desk by the end of the day. He turned, dismissing me. I walked out of his office in a daze, clutching my box of personal effects. Chloe met me at the elevator, her eyes wide with shock. Elsie, what happened? They just said you were leaving. He fired me, Chloe, I whispered, the words barely audible. He called my dad's code. Doodles again. Said it was a liability. Said I was a liability for sticking to it. Tears welled up, blurring my vision. My dad spent his whole life making things elegant, making things work perfectly. And Mr. Sterling, he just tossed it aside like trash. My throat was tight with a mix of sadness and a cold, quiet rage. I knew deep down that those doodles were more than just a style. They were the backbone of some of Omnitech's most stable systems, including hidden foundational elements of Project Horizon that Mr. Sterling probably didn't even know existed. They were deeply embedded, like roots. He had no idea what he had just done. And a little seed of an idea, dark and dangerous, began to sprout in my humiliated heart. Being fired felt like falling into a deep, dark hole. One day, I was Elsie Davies, hotshot coder, making things sing at Omnitech. The next, I was just Elsie. Jobless. Humiliated. My apartment felt too quiet. I spent days just staring at the ceiling, replaying Mr. Sterling's sneering face, his cutting words. Doodles. Liability. My father's genius, my own hard work, all dismissed with such casual cruelty. Chloe called, tried to cheer me up, offered to help with my resume. Don't let that jerk get to you, Elle, she'd say. You're brilliant. Omnitech's loss. But it felt like more than just a job loss. It felt like a personal attack on everything I believed in, everything my dad taught me. One afternoon, still feeling sorry for myself, I pulled out an old box of my dad's things. Notebooks filled with his sprawling handwriting, diagrams, circuit boards, and floppy disks, remember those? On one disk, labeled simply Arthur's Sandbox, I found a backup of some of his oldest projects. Buried deep within were the very first iterations of his Doodle code, the foundational elements he eventually refined and integrated into countless systems, including, I knew, Omnitech's older infrastructure. My dad had been a consulting architect for Omnitech way before I ever joined. He'd laid some deep roots. As I looked at the familiar, elegant structures, a thought sparked. Mr. Sterling had fired me because of my code, my current implementation of the comms module. But my dad's core Doodles were still there, deep in the legacy systems Omnitech relied on. They were stable, so stable that nobody ever touched them. They were like the bedrock. And I knew exactly how they worked. More importantly, I knew their unique, almost artistic vulnerabilities, not flaws, mind you, but specific interaction points that only someone steeped in my dad's methods would understand. These weren't bugs. They were features designed for robust control and adaptability, features Mr. Sterling would never appreciate or even notice. An idea started to form, slow and chilling. What if I could make those Doodles speak for themselves? What if I could show Mr. Sterling and everyone else just how powerful and indispensable my father's legacy truly was? The Project Horizon launch was still happening. It was just a few weeks away now. I knew the timeline. Omnitech had poured millions into it. It was going to be a huge, live broadcast event. Mr. Sterling would be front and center, basking in the glory. Chloe came over one evening with pizza and wine, trying to lift my spirits. You know, Elle, they're really scrambling over at Omnitech, she said, biting into a slice. After you left, they had to pull a bunch of people to rewrite your comms module from scratch. It's slowing everything down. And Mr. Sterling's furious about the delays. Good, I mumbled, a flicker of satisfaction. He deserves it. Seriously though, how are you doing? Found anything new? I hesitated. Could I tell Chloe? She was my best friend. But this felt bigger, riskier. I'm working on something, I said vaguely. Thinking about some old projects, seeing if I can put them to use. Chloe eyed me. Elsie, don't do anything crazy, okay? You're too talented to get into trouble. She didn't know how crazy my thoughts were getting. The seeds of revenge from Section 1 were now sprouting into a thorny, complex plan. I started working. Not on finding a new job, not on updating my resume. I started working on my plan. My dad, in his foresight, had built a very subtle, almost invisible, backdoor into some of his foundational code for system monitoring and emergency overrides. It wasn't malicious. It was a safety net, designed for engineers to maintain stability in complex systems without having to shut everything down. It allowed a direct, privileged interface. A master key, if you will, to his Doodles. I knew the sequence. I knew the specific protocols. I knew the exact hidden points in the code where his Doodles were still operating, untouched by Mr. Sterling's rewrite, because they were so fundamental. My focus narrowed. The comms module I'd built was being replaced. But that module relied on a deeper, more fundamental layer of network architecture that my dad had designed years ago, a layer that was still very much in place within Omnitech's core infrastructure. Mr. Sterling, in his rush to replace anything he deemed inefficient, wouldn't have understood the intricate dependencies. He'd only seen the surface. He would have never dared to touch the deep, stable, boring parts that just worked. But I knew those parts. I knew their heartbeat. The more I delved, the more I realized the scale of the operation. This wasn't just about a module, it was about the entire launch sequence, the telemetry, the live data feeds that would be beamed to millions. This was going to be live on national TV. My initial idea of just causing a little hiccup started to feel small and petty. This was a chance to make a statement. A big one. My dad's code, his Doodles, was the perfect weapon. It was so elegant, so seamless, that any unexpected behavior would be dismissed as a bug, a glitch, a random error. No one would suspect a human intervention. Especially not from a recently fired employee. That was the beauty of it. I spent countless hours mapping out the network, identifying the precise points of intervention. I needed to ensure that my specific interaction point, the one linked to my dad's back door, would trigger at a critical moment during the live broadcast. Not to destroy the mission, I wasn't a monster, but to make it undeniably clear that his command, Mr. Sterling's command, was powerless without the very Doodles he scorned. My plan wasn't just about making something fail, it was about controlling the outcome, demonstrating the power of what he dismissed. I had a moment of intense doubt. Fear, really? What if I got caught? What if it went too far? What if I accidentally messed up the entire launch, costing people their jobs, Omnitech its reputation? It was a massive undertaking. I pictured Mr. Sterling's face again, flushed with anger as he told me I was a liability, that my father's work was trash. That image pushed the fear aside. This wasn't just for me anymore, it was for Dad. It was for his legacy. And I realized Mr. Sterling's new team, in their rush to replace my module, had inadvertently created a subtle dependency on one of my dad's older, unpatched, foundational Doodle modules. They had tried to rewrite, but incompletely, leaving a gaping hole only I could exploit. A critical piece of data, I realized, still had to pass through a gateway protected by Arthur's sandbox. The perfect, silent stage for my revenge was set. The day of the Project Horizon launch dawned clear and bright. My stomach was a knot of nerves and grim satisfaction. I was at my apartment, not Omnitech, watching the live broadcast on my old, slightly fuzzy TV. Chloe had called earlier, excited about the launch, but I'd kept my replies vague. I told her I was watching from home. Mr. Sterling was there, live on screen, standing on the main stage at Mission Control, looking incredibly smug in his perfectly tailored suit. He was smiling, shaking hands, soaking up the pre-launch fanfare. The commentators were gushing about Omnitech's innovation, its vision. He didn't know what was coming. I had spent the last few days in a haze of final checks, double-checking my remote access protocols, my timing sequences. It was all about precision. I wasn't going to crash the satellite. I was going to prove a point. A very loud, very public point. My hands, usually steady as a rock when I coded, were trembling slightly. This was it. There was no turning back. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. Mr. Sterling stepped up to the main console, a dramatic flourish as he prepared to input the final launch command. The camera zoomed in on his confident face. He looked ready to take all the credit. 7, 6, 5. My fingers hovered over my keyboard, miles away. My small apartment felt like the control center of the universe. I had a precise window, a microsecond, really, when my dad's old module, the one Mr. Sterling's team unknowingly relied on for the final command handshake, would be active. 4, 3, 2. Mr. Sterling, a triumphant smile spreading across his face, pressed the big red button, the one labeled launch. Liftoff, the commentator boomed, anticipation thick in the air. But nothing happened. The screen at Mission Control, instead of showing the rocket powering up, stayed stubbornly blank. The big red button on the console Mr. Sterling had just pressed remained lit, but the actual launch sequence froze. The commentator's cheerful chatter died, replaced by a sudden, confused silence. Mr. Sterling's smug smile vanished, replaced by a look of bewildered shock. He pressed the button again. Nothing. A ripple of nervous energy went through Mission Control. People started whispering, pointing at screens. A junior technician frantically tapped at a keyboard. We seem to be experiencing a minor technical delay, folks, the commentator stammered, trying to sound calm. Just a momentary hold, I'm sure. But the delay wasn't minor. And it wasn't a hold. My code, my dad's Doodles, buried deep in that essential handshake module, had just refused Mr. Sterling's command. It wasn't a catastrophic failure, it was a deliberate, elegant refusal. The system was waiting for my command. On my laptop, a small, custom interface glowed. It showed the system status, frozen, awaiting a specific override sequence. My dad had built this years ago, for scenarios where a system might become unresponsive or need a specific, trusted intervention. A Doodle firewall, you could call it. Mr. Sterling's command, lacking a particular legacy authentication token, was simply ignored by the core system. It couldn't proceed without it. I typed rapidly, my fingers now steady. I entered the precise, intricate sequence, a hidden key known only to me, a legacy signature from Arthur's sandbox. I didn't activate the launch directly. Instead, I rerouted the initial system diagnostics, making it appear as if a complex but fixable bug was preventing the command. I made it look like the system was performing a self-check, a reinitialization. And then, subtly, I allowed Mr. Sterling's launch command to finally pass through, but with my dad's legacy authentication stamp embedded, ensuring that his system only responded because of the doodles he hated. On the live broadcast, after what felt like an eternity, but was probably only about 3 agonizing minutes, the mission control screens flickered back to life. Then, with a roar, the actual rocket, which had been sitting silently on the launch pad, ignited. Fire and smoke billowed. The commentator screamed with renewed excitement, and there it goes. Project Horizon is a GEO. A slight delay, but a successful liftoff. Mr. Sterling, looking pale and disoriented, managed to compose himself, forcing a weak, relieved smile. He still didn't know what had happened or why. He just knew it had almost gone disastrously wrong, and then, inexplicably, it hadn't. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Millions watched, confused by the hiccup, but ultimately thrilled by the successful launch. Last week, they smiled, thinking it was a bug. Today, they watched and didn't understand that I had controlled the outcome. The next few days were a whirlwind of news reports about the mysterious pre-launch glitch and the miraculous recovery. Omnitech issued a statement about unforeseen minor software anomalies that were quickly resolved. Nobody suspected a thing. Nobody connected it to me. But I knew. And Mr. Sterling knew, in his gut, that something had gone terribly wrong that he couldn't explain. His moment of triumph was tainted. He looked like a puppet whose strings had almost been cut, only to be retied at the last second. Chloe called me, her voice buzzing with excitement. "Elsie, did you see? It was amazing." A bit scary there for a second, but they pulled it off. Everyone's talking about the bug. Omnitech looks like heroes for fixing it so fast. "Yeah, Chloe," I said, a small, secret smile playing on my lips. Heroes indeed. My phone rang again a few days later. It was a headhunter. "Miss Davies, I understand you're currently available? I've heard some very impressive things about your work on advanced communications modules. A competitor, Nova Systems, is looking for a lead architect for their new lunar base project. They specifically asked about your innovative approaches." I paused. Nova Systems was Omnitech's biggest rival. Innovative approaches, not Doodles. And a lunar base project? It sounded exactly like the kind of challenge my dad would have loved. "Tell me more," I said, a genuine, happy smile finally spreading across my face. Mr. Sterling had thought he could bury my father's legacy, but he only gave me the shovel to dig it up, polish it, and show it to the entire world. Justice, I realized, didn't always have to be loud. Sometimes it was quiet, precise, and completely controlled. The memory of Mr. Sterling's face, frozen in confusion and fear, was a sweet, silent victory. The future looked bright, a clean slate, filled with new challenges and real respect for the kind of doodles that truly made a difference. All the questions were answered, all arcs closed. Before you go, tell me in the comments, what's a moment in your life where you truly felt in control, even when things seemed chaotic? I'd love to hear it.